Hello, hello, and welcome to the On My Mind podcast. My name is Remy Keene, your host, and on the podcast we always talk about what's on our mind and how it impacts our day, whether it's for good or bad, and we want to keep good things on our mind. So today I have an awesome guest with me. Her name is Kate Hurley Krause, and she wrote a book titled The Prodigal Mind. It's a quiz, it's a course, and it kind of helps you come out of a negative self-talk mindset. And I'm not the expert, of course, on that yet, but that's why we have our guests. So first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, I bet you're pretty good at it if you've been thinking about it for so long. But
Oh, absolutely.
yes,
Absolutely.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad that we get to come together and have a conversation. Whenever I saw the post in the group that we're in, I was like, yeah, that's someone I want on my podcast. So I'm so happy that you're here.
Oh, thank you
Uh,
so much.
yeah. Well, why don't you share a little bit about yourself just to introduce who you are, what you do for fun? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So again, I'm Kate Hurley Krause. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I am kind of a jack of many trades. It's funny you say what you do for fun because I'm like, I do lots of fun things, but they're almost all work though. Because I teach music lessons and I also make albums. I was a touring musician for 14 years, so I traveled all over the world with my music, and I was part of another worship circle. If you've ever heard of that, it was a long time ago now, but and then I teach music lessons. So and then I lead worship at 3 churches. So lots and lots and lots of music.
Wow.
So much
That's
music.
awesome.
But I also love to write. And if I could, choose, I'd probably balance it out more with more writing because I really love writing too. But yeah, music is wonderful. It pays the bills. But I have days where I'm like, I just want to sit and write for like 3 days straight.
Right.
So yes.
What inspires you to write music? To like what originally, like, would you say sparked you? Did it just come naturally, or was it something you just loved from the beginning, or how'd you fall in love with music?
Yeah, well, I came from a pretty hard family, but we had a piano. My mom gave me piano lessons, and from the very first lesson, I was just like, loved it. And it was very cathartic for me. Like, I would just really just sit at that piano and play for hours when I was struggling. And in fact, I think it kind of really helped me, get through all that without substances and stuff like that. It was like the creativity was almost like an outlet for me to express myself and get some of my emotions out. And I think that's happened throughout my whole life, really. Like when I'm going through a hard time, I just like get like crazy creative. I'm just like
That's awesome.
so, but it's a good way to have some catharsis and get your emotions out on paper or in a song or whatever the creative thing might be.
Oh yeah. I can tell you I related to you right away on that because I was like, music is just something that takes me to a better place. Now I've changed like the type of music I listen to. Like in high school, it was extra depressing type of music. So the lyrical content got much better when I, came to know Jesus. And ultimately I was like, okay, yeah, this is what I need in my life, like more positive lyrics. Now I still like all sorts of types of genres of music, but I'm like, music just helps me get out how I feel and
Mm.
what I feel. So yeah, I loved like when I was reading about you, and I was like, music is like through and through. And then you told me before this, before we recorded the episode, you had a like a music lesson. I'm like, oh, she even teaches it.
Oh
That's
yeah,
awesome.
that's my
I
main
love
thing.
that.
Yeah, and I love it, especially because I have them do a lot of composing and songwriting. So it's so rewarding to have any of my students write songs, but even the younger ones. Like right
Oh
now, I
yeah.
have a project where they're all like a bunch of them are writing songs for their parents for Christmas. So that's always really special and so
Oh, that's
very fun
awesome.
job. So such a fun job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Goodness. Anything you can find that inspires you. Like you said, you're busy with all work. Like you feel like everything you do is fun and work. I'm like, if you do fun things for work, it's like you never work a day in your life, right? It's
That's
like,
true.
that's the saying. And I'm like, I love recording my podcasts, and I love like the hobbies I do, even though they like fill my time to where I'm just the busiest person, it's like I just have something to do all the time. Plus, I'm a dad and all of that. So,
Yeah.
what about personally? If you want to share about that sort
Yeah.
of journey.
Yeah, so I was single until I was 46, almost 46. So a very, very, very long time. And in fact, I had a blog about singleness that did pretty well for a while. And then I had a book on singleness. So it was a big part of my life, the singleness was. And, I had kind of given up. Like it was a very, very hard part of my life. And then I met my wonderful husband, and then I got four wonderful stepkids in the mix too. And I feel like God taught me a lot while I was single, but it's just really nice to have my somebody and to be a mom. I've always wanted to
Yeah.
be a mom. It was like very, very hard for me to not be a mom. So
Mhm.
I feel really grateful. And where my husband's building a cabin for us, and it's almost done. It's been a 3-year process. So we're hoping to get it in the next few weeks, which is very exciting. He's worked so, so, so hard on it.
That's amazing.
So that's
That's
kind of
awesome.
my family life right now. Yeah.
Cool. I love that. I love when, you feel like it's been a long time and it's like, but everybody's journey is different. And it's like, I have friends who still, are planning to get married and they're single in their 40s. So I feel like your story could inspire hope for people too. And just that, you never give up because, I mean, instantly getting four amazing kids, like you said, and all of that. Like, I come from broken home. My parents got divorced when I was 12, and like my step sisters and my half sister, and it's like I don't call them that except for when I refer to them, but honestly they're just my sisters. It's like I just think of
Yeah.
them as that. I never it's like I get
Yeah.
more family, and
Yes,
that's a cool
exactly.
thing.
Exactly. And I always kind of knew I was going to adopt someday, but this was kind of a roundabout way of that happening.
There
And
you go.
I really won the lottery with my stepkids. They treat me so with so much love and so much affection, and they call me Mama Kate. And
Oh,
so
that's
yeah,
awesome.
I got really blessed with that. So
Cool. All right. Well, let's talk about the prodigal mind. Why don't you share a little bit about it here and just kind of talk about what inspired it and then the journey so far?
yeah, so I had written that book on singleness, and the publishers kept saying you should write another book, and I really didn't know what to write about. So, but then I went on this retreat one day, and everything I was reading, everything that God was kind of showing me pointed towards the fact that my mind was not in a great place, and maybe never has been in a great place, and that I'm compassionate on everyone except myself. Like it was a big revelation to me that like I was so kind to other people but not kind to myself, and that a lot of that was happening in my mind. A lot of I mean, I think it feels a little like human nature. A lot of people, probably almost everybody, struggles with this, where you're, just mean to yourself a lot, And so on that retreat, I just really felt like I need to write this book, even if it's not for anybody else but me. Like, I really want to go on a journey where my mind becomes a more peaceful place to live. Because at the
Yeah.
time, it felt like, like a ghetto. It was it's dangerous to go in there at night. Like, who knows what's going to happen, So I
Yeah.
wanted to make it my interior landscape to be a more peaceful, beautiful neighborhood with flowers and parks and
Yeah. I love that. I love that thought of like the neighborhood and yeah, it's a dark scary place sometimes.
yeah.
That's great. So like I saw that there's like different like personalities and like different things that we lean to, and I'm like, wow, I never even really thought of like all the negativity kind of like having a face and having a name, back when I was struggling with it so much. And I feel like I've gotten better, but then when I took the quiz, I'm like, yeah, I still think that about myself.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Basically, yeah. My publisher said maybe you shouldn't call it personalities because people think you're like schizophrenic. So I called it characters. Yeah, but yeah. So and now like there's kind of a popular psychology a way that psychologists called parts work, where there's like different parts that they talk to and stuff like that. But I didn't even know that existed when I started my book. Like I had no idea. And then like 4 years in, my best friend who's a counselor was like, "Oh, this sounds a lot like internal family systems." And I like read about it. I'm like, it sounds like I copied this person, but I did not. So
You're right.
maybe it's somewhat universal, but honestly, the idea that there are parts in us, or that Jesus wants to take the parts and make them more whole, is kind of throughout the Bible.
Yeah.
I wish I knew them by heart, but there's one about your heart being divided. Give me an undivided heart, and there's several other ones. I wish I had them in front of me, but they're it's actually kind of like when you see them, you're like, oh wow, I never realized that God actually talked about this, like helping these different parts of you to come together and be more whole, rather
Mhm.
than this brokenness. So yeah, there's different characters is kind of the way I like
Yeah.
made it so people can understand it a little better, that each have kind of different characteristics and ways of talking and things like that. So that was my way of kind of taking out what was going on inside of me and organizing it and making more sense.
Right. Right. So whenever I went into it blind because I was like, if I take this quiz, I don't want to know what the other ones are because I don't want to like answer any like certain type and like try to get something. So I just totally went in blind and take it and took it. And honestly, I'm going to link the quiz in the show notes and just make sure that you go and take it blind without, trying to get any certain answer because like I wanted to think better of myself, that I was that, comforting friend that to myself that I am to other people, kind of like you shared. And yeah, I don't think I'm quite all the way there, though I do think I've come a little bit, of a distance further than what I used to treat myself as. But whenever I read over the result that I got, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's me.
Good to
So
know.
so I want to know, have you taken it? And
Oh yes,
yeah,
well I have, I mean,
I mean,
but
you created it, right? So it's like, how do you take it? Or like,
well, yes, well, I mean, I really, the one that I resonate with the most by far, which is probably how the whole book started, was me thinking specifically about this quote unquote character, was the orphan.
the orphan.
So the orphan character kind of just always is afraid of being abandoned, and in fact, puts on almost like rejection glasses where, like, somebody you love might not even be rejecting you, but you take it as rejection. And that's nothing against you. You probably have experienced all kinds of not great things, and so your internal, child or whatever, that orphan, is just like, please don't let this happen again. So it just kind of comes up so starkly. And I've really, that's the one I definitely identify with the most, and
Yeah.
it's probably the instigator of all the other ones. I was like, oh, people probably have other ones too. But I mean, I relate to a few other ones too, but that's definitely the main one. And it's something I've
Yeah.
noticed being married, where
Hmm.
my husband will say something and I feel myself doing that whole thing, and then I'm like, he's not rejecting you right now, like, what are you even saying? Like, or and sometimes I'm able to go, he loves me, like, I trust that he loves me, and I'm not going to let these glasses tell me that he doesn't love me. So
Right.
that's, it's been very helpful for me. But yeah, that orphan one is definitely the one I still struggle with, and trying to calm and
Hmm.
love into more peace, that character.
That's good. Yeah, the orphan, I feel like I relate to that one. The one that I got was the hider.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
Yeah, I would say in high school I was very much in my shell. I was afraid of speaking out loud. I would literally take F's in like speech class to not give the speech, but I'd
Mm.
turn in all the work to do the speech. So then they would like upgrade me to just a D or whatever. But ultimately I was just so afraid of people and what they thought of me, and really it was me that I was afraid of. In a way, it
Mm.
was it was not the fact that I don't know, I was like, it's definitely not just the other people and what they think, because I don't read
Mm.
their minds. It's totally totally me.
Oh, well, that's
Yeah,
such a good example of how, like, one of the things I talk about is that sometimes your greatest weakness can become your greatest strength when God redeems it and He helps that character heal. And so, what a cool thing that with you that you didn't even want to do a speech in front of a class, and now you have a podcast and you're speaking to lots of people,
I
and
know.
you overcame that fear, and now that greatest weakness is your greatest strength.
I agree, and yeah, as soon as I saw it, I was like, man, I feel exactly like this was, it's like in my weakness, God, shows His strength, and it's like I've led classes at church and talked in front of people, and I've taken tithe and offering in front of the whole congregation, things I never would have been able to do, but it's because I'm so in love with Jesus that I don't mind telling people how good
Mm.
He is as long as
Hmm.
He gets the focus and I don't,
Hmm.
because then and maybe I'm hiding still in a way that like that, but I think that's the best type of hiding you could do is with Jesus, like
Hmm.
yeah, because yeah, it's like now I'm seen by Him, and that's all that matters, right?
Hmm.
It's like once I read over all of the one who becomes seen, right? The one who is seen, I was like, oh yeah, yeah, that's how I
Yes,
feel now.
yeah. So yeah, so each one of them have a redeeming quality. And yeah, that was the hider, right? The one that is seen, or not a redeeming quality, but like what that person becomes once their identity is changed by Jesus.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you're the one that's seen. That's so cool.
yeah, I loved it, but for the listener, the viewer, what would you share with them once they figure out how, like, who they identify with as far as your characters, and then how they translate that into bringing it, where they are in their journey, and then how do they get to that redeemed quality?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I think the whole reason I kind of designed it this way is sometimes when you can take something inside of you and separate it from yourself somewhat, it's like easier to see it. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like it's like when it's inside, it's like you're kind of blind to it. But if you can put it outside of yourself and then see it, that's one of the reasons I think that the characters the was the way I wanted to do it, because it's almost like you're separating that part of yourself out and you're seeing it separate from yourself. And so, and I made this acronym, and I am not an acronym person. I mean, I like cringe a little bit if like the pastor's like, here's the five
Yeah.
L's to how to have a perfect life. I'm like, nope, I guess I'm like blanking out, you know. But so it's kind of ironic that I made an acronym because I don't like them that much. But I will honestly say that this acronym that I used in the book is what I have taken away from the book more than anything else. And that's to make your thoughts new, NEW. So cheesy, but it's okay.
I like it.
So the N is notice and name when you're having a limiting thought, and having these characters is helpful for that, right? Because
Yeah.
I know the orphan is the one that I gravitate towards the most, so I can kind of hear in my mind, oh, I just had a very orphan like thought,
Hmm.
like this
Yeah.
person will never love you, or like if people get to know you, they always leave. Like that those are very orphan things to say or to
Hmm.
hear. So because I now know that that's the character I gravitate towards, I can especially notice that thought. So that was the first step, is notice and name.
Okay.
The second thought is, or second part of that acronym is to envision what your life would feel like and look like if you were to let go of that thought. So,
Okay.
for example, if it was the orphan and I wanted to envision it, like, I mean, I even had this happen with my husband when we were still dating, and he didn't answer my text for 6 hours, something like that.
Hmm.
And I was like panicking a little bit because, like, I had always been rejected before. Again, I have compassion on myself for that, because I had lots of not great relationships with men who were not committal. So of course I'm going to have some of that fear come up. Like
Yeah.
I understand why I was like that, but this time around, he didn't answer me for 6 hours. And I'm like, he doesn't love me anymore, he's going to leave. This kind of very orphan thinking. And then I actually sat down and wrote out these three acronyms. So notice and name. And I noticed and named, like, I think he's going to leave me. I think that even if he doesn't write to me for 6 hours, he's like lost interest. And then when I did the envision, it was really helpful for me, because I realized if I were to let go of that rejection way of thinking and those rejection glasses, then not only would I be more free to be myself and to not have to perform in an order for somebody not to leave or whatever, but he would feel much more free too. He wouldn't feel like he was walking on eggshells to make sure I felt loved all the time. And that really hit me. Like the way I'm thinking can also be affecting him and
Yeah.
making his life harder, even though he loves me, because my thinking isn't very good. So that was the second. The E is for envision, and then the W is whirl around that thought to 180 degrees to make a different thought. And you want this to be honest. It's not just like you like, I don't know. I mean, you don't want it to be just like an inauthentic thing, like that you don't believe. But I mean, if you can kind of craft it to be the right thing, like for instance, I could think my normal thought is everyone rejects me. Well, whirling it around, the easiest one would be nobody will reject me, but that's not necessarily true. Like a better whirling around would be people might reject me, but I am loved at my core by God, and I'm going to hold on to that and realize that my identity is in that and not in whether people stay or not. So yeah, so the NEW it's still helpful for me. So
Yeah, that's honestly, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like naming it. I love that because then like I feel like in the Bible, I was reading Romans 7 and that's the one where Paul talks like about I hate the things I
mm,
do. I don't know why I do them still. It's like if I just don't understand why, but it's like it's not me, it's like it's that other nature.
mm,
And once he gave it a name, he was like, yeah, that's the part of me I don't want
mm,
to listen to. And I feel like that's real good because like now I'm like, is that hider Remy or is that
mm.
actual Remy talking, right? Is
Right.
that redeemed Remy?
I never
Well
really
it's like
thought how much that passage really relates to
yeah,
mine.
it,
Yeah,
it
and then
was good.
yeah, another kind of biblical way I've seen this is like David. David will often talk to his soul. So
Oh yeah.
so that's very much this kind of a thing too, right? He's separating out like kind of the best part of him, and then he's like, or no, actually, well, maybe the not best part of him will be the soul, because he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, my soul, why are you so
Right.
downcast? Put your hope
Yeah.
in God." So again, he's kind of able to like separate himself a little bit and like talk to himself, talk to that part of himself that is struggling or like has a really hard time, and telling that part of himself, you know what, we're gonna be okay. So it is still kind of parts like even that, but that reference to Paul also. I mean, you can tell the turmoil that he's going through, which is a very human turmoil to have. Like I do what I don't want to do, and
Yeah.
it's just like this internal turmoil. So it's a good
Yeah,
example.
and honestly, it's like you find these little victories now. Like once I took the quiz, I'm like, okay, how do I apply this? And I just tried, right? I just was like, how do I see if I'm the hider? Because I've always found it hard to talk myself up to people, and I just went through an interview at work where I was up for a promotion, and it was Friday, and I was like. I'm just probably not going to get it anyway. So, I mean, I
Mm,
might as well just, and I feel like comparison, that's probably a little bit of just, I don't know, critic, probably a little bit too. I saw a bunch of them come out, but compassionate friend would say, no, you've been there a really long time and you maybe deserve some spotlight. So
mm.
go talk yourself up, right? And it's like now I can be like, what would the compassionate friend say to me if I was, talking to someone else? What would I say? Because
Yeah,
I always find myself building other people up, but I
right.
struggle to build myself up a
Yeah,
little
it's
bit.
so weird.
Yeah.
It's like, why does that happen? But it does.
Yeah.
I heard a really interesting radio show about this virtual reality game that they made, and so it's a little hard to explain. But basically, you are in the virtual reality game, and the person in your ear says, "Tell me about a problem you're having," and so then you talk about the problem you're having. But then all of a sudden, you're Sigmund Freud. Like and then there's a virtual reality of your face, and you are telling you, it's your voice telling you the problem you're having. And
Mm.
so it's like you're listening to your problem, but but it's somebody else, and you're the
It lets you
counselor.
put yourself outside of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so then as Sigmund Freud, you give advice back to
Oh.
yourself. It's a little hard to describe, but and
Yeah.
then you're back in yourself listening to the advice that you gave yourself. But anyway, it was a very interesting radio show because the person was saying that like all of a sudden he had compassion on himself like he didn't before, and also like he felt bad, like wow, this is a hard problem, you know.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
he also was like amazed at the advice he gave himself, you know? And I was like, that is so funny. For some reason, when it's separate from us, you know, I call it inside-itis. It's almost like
Mm.
it's like laryngitis or some kind of sickness, but it's like inside-itis because you're inside of yourself. All of a sudden, you think everybody else in the world is beautiful and awesome and amazing, but you
Mhm.
know you are horrible and ugly and you know,
Yeah. Right.
it's like for some reason, for some odd reason, it's like when we're inside of ourselves, we're so different towards ourselves. It's like, but I think it's pretty human nature. It seems like most people struggle with that. And
I mean, you can see that in the Instagram effect. It's like everybody else has this amazing life and my life sucks
right,
because I
that's
see everything.
right.
But if you saw everything they had going on too, you'd see the truth, right? So, I mean, you seeing you from the inside, you probably want to be more of a critic, more harsh on yourself
Hmm.
because you're like, "Oh, I don't deserve that because of what I just did." It's like, but when you put on like the mind of Christ, I feel like Jesus is like, nope, you're redeemed. Nope, I paid for that. And it's like
Mm,
if you keep reminding yourself that, God already paid for it way before you ever did it. So
mm, hmm,
stop dwelling on your failure,
hmm,
get up, fix it, move forward, right? I
hmm,
mean, that
hmm,
it's so hard to do that. It's so easy to say it, and it's like but daily it's like you got to realize it's like I want to die to that hider person, that old self, and I want to put on that new self that's confident, able to be compassionate not only to others but to yourself, right?
hmm.
I always talk on the podcast about how whenever we keep good things on our mind, like when we are thinking positive thoughts about ourselves and about life, it's also going to spill onto others, and then that good is going to come back on you also, kind of like karma, but you reap what you sow. So if you sow good into others and love and joy, if you sow the fruit of the Spirit into yourself and other people, you're going to be able to reap that back.
That's
Now,
absolutely, yeah.
now the other thing I always say is don't expect it. So, how would you say if you're trying to overcome being one of these and then someone does treat you that way, how do
Mm,
you repair from that, or how do you not just be like, see, I
mm,
should be treated
hmm.
like that?
Yeah. Well, I think we touched on it a little bit, but the character we're trying to tap into the most is the compassionate friend. So that compassionate friend knows that they are loved by God, and they also kind of love themselves in a different way and even love these characters. You don't want to hate these characters. You're calming them down.
Right.
You're comforting them because they've been through a lot, So I would say the more that you are able to walk closer with God, first of all, and develop that compassionate friend, I mean, through God, God is helping you develop that. When you have stuff like that happen, it's a lot easier to go, you know, that's not true.
Right.
I mean, I think I went through so many relationships over all my single years where the man ended up rejecting me, like acted very interested at first and then rejected me, so that whole orphan narrative was happening. But I would say those last 5 or 6 years that I was single, I had a different attitude. I was like, I'm awesome. Like, what's wrong with these people? Like, I would be a great wife. Like, this is so dumb. And not in a bad way. It just helped me change my perspective from there's something unlovable in you to like this might have nothing to do with you. It might have to do with them, or maybe this isn't the right person for you. But I do think just tapping into that compassionate friend where that part of me that's my friend is like, oh, you have some really good qualities. It's so easy as Christians to kind of demonize uh confidence as being like prideful.
Yeah.
But I would say the average person is not prideful. I mean, even people who seem prideful are probably very scared on the inside. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So there's something to like allowing yourself kindness, and saying, but also being real. Also, like, I'm not good at certain things, but other people are, and
Hmm.
we are all a part of the body of Christ. We all need each other to show Christ to the world,
Right.
and to me, that's true humility. Isn't hiding yourself like we're talking about with the hider, because what if somebody needs to hear something you have to say and you hide it, you know
Hmm.
then
Yeah.
that's still kind of selfish. But boasting on the other side and thinking you're better than everybody, that's also not humility. I think true humility is when you have confidence that God made you beautiful, and you give God the credit for that, and even yourself. I mean, I think it's okay to be like, I went through this and it was really hard, but I came out the other side. But then also knowing that other people are the same way. Other people are beautiful, and if you go too far to like, other people are amazing, I'm not, that can be selfish.
Mm.
Or I'm amazing and nobody else is, that's also not good. But
Yeah.
when you're in the middle and you realize that God made you beautiful, he made everybody around you beautiful, and together you make a way of showing God to the world. That's when I think true humility happens.
Yeah, that's awesome because like I you just got to find that balance that it's okay to be confident but not cocky and
Right.
arrogant, and it's okay to, love others but don't think that they're always better than you. It's like sometimes you have value to add to the conversation. Like your testimony is yours. Nobody else has
Mm,
your testimony.
mm,
So don't be afraid to share that with people. Don't be
yeah.
afraid to encourage others with what you've gone through because only you've gone through that. And
Yeah.
imagine, like, I always think about like one part of the body trying to be another part. If your whole body was just eyes because they
Mm,
really like seeing, we couldn't hear, we couldn't taste, we couldn't touch, all
hmm.
that. And it's like if we all were, just the same part, it wouldn't be as beautiful as it
Mm.
is when we all work together as the body of
Absolutely,
Christ. So.
yeah. When I had that retreat where I realized I wanted to write Prodigal Mind book, one of the things that happened was I was reading the scripture I've read a million times, which is, love the neighbor, love the Lord your God with all your heart, strength, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm.
And I think I was all of a sudden like, wow, he said love your neighbor as yourself, not more than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was really enlightening to me because, like I say in my book, like I had 2/3 of that commandment down. I had prayed and, served and blah blah blah, all this stuff with God, and loved and knelt down and helped people and all this stuff. And then loving my neighbor, like I had done all this missions work and all these things. But when it came to loving myself, like that I did not have that part of the commandment down. Like I had,
Yeah.
not been kind to myself, and overeaten and undereaten and like on and on and on, all the so I just realized that it was like Jesus was telling me, like, no, this is part of the commandment, is for you to like not hate yourself so much. Like,
Right.
I don't want you to hate yourself. So that was a little eye opening.
That is really awesome. It's like that scripture. I've always looked at the fact, well, I don't love myself very much. Like that's
Mm,
the thing. But I found like I'm a love me the way that Christ made me to be. Right. I'm gonna love that person and then take that into the loving others aspect of my life. It's like, yeah, it's so important that we share that love with other people. So now here's a fun question that I like to do, and you can take a second if you need to, but I always like to give you the host role. And if you could ask yourself one question that you would want to answer, what would it be?
that's a fun question.
Yeah.
It goes back to our like giving therapy to your own
Yeah.
person. I think for me, like I was telling you earlier, I was really focused on this book for a while. I got kind of discouraged. I mean, it's funny, like, self talk. I got discouraged because my first book was very easy to get published. They wanted it right away. This one, like, my book agent loved it and said anybody would want it, but they shopped it around and nobody took it. So, it's a little daunting to write a 400-page book or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
that was unedited. And then just be like, I guess that's not going to happen, and then that's been a hard part of my life because like as a musician also, I put so much out into the world. And like as a musician, you can't even at this point, you can't even really make money unless you're touring. Sometimes my last few albums I've lost money, but I still do it because I know people are blessed by it. But sometimes I get
Right.
so discouraged with that kind of thing,
Mhm.
and as much as people tell me like, uh, you know, and I do believe like I'm glad it gets out there, but I just have days where I'm like, gosh, it would be nice if like I can make money off of these things I've put so much effort into, like that book. I mean, I worked
Sure.
so hard on that book, and then it didn't come out. So I would almost ask myself like, how are you applying this, now, even outside of the book that you wrote a book about self talk, and then you had a lot of hard feelings come up because that book wasn't published. So now how are you taking what you wrote in that book and applying it to your life?
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I like, even as we were starting, I thought, gosh, I was really on this train of really getting a lot better about this. But even the last few months, I've been like, it's been harder for me.
Mm.
So it is a good reminder for me to go back to my own words and the wisdom that God has given me on and overcoming negative self-talk. I think mostly I've gotten into a rut of not noticing anymore that it's happening. And I'm
Mhm.
just, every once in a while, I'll be like, whoa, why did I just say something so mean to myself? So for me, it's like, how can you apply that in this season of your life? And even to things that you really don't like. Sometimes it's easy to tell somebody else to do something and not do it yourself. So yeah, so I think that would be a good question for me, like, how can you
Yeah.
keep applying this? I probably need that right now. So
Yeah, that's really great because honestly, it translates to listener and the viewer. How are you going to notice unless you don't bring it back to your remembrance?
yeah.
And when the person that wrote the book even struggles with remembering to apply it, I that's why I feel like we need Jesus's word in our lives daily, and to actually be mindful. And I just did a series recently on intentional action, daily planning out. If I get put in this situation, what's it gonna do? Intentional living, but with Jesus intention, like God
Mm-hmm.
intentions
Mm-hmm.
instead of just my own intentions. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really good because it shows that even though you have the knowledge, if you don't apply it, I thought of this analogy that my pastors always talk about is like, imagine you give someone the exact steps on what you want your house to be cleaned, and you pay them in advance to clean your house, and then they're like, man, I read that book, I love it. I love this little verse here on this page, and it's so good. But you come back and your house is dirty still, and you paid
Mm-hmm.
them just to read the book. It's like, but
Mm.
you didn't apply anything in the book to your
Mm.
life.
Right,
So
right.
it's like we do that with the Bible. It's like, oh, I love that verse. I'm not gonna do anything about it, but I
Right,
love it.
right. Well, I talked
It's
about
like,
fruit. I mean, fruit is the actual thing that happens once you take
right,
in the nutrients or whatever. That's the fruit is what actually happens.
right,
Yeah, and I do feel like like maybe the first few years after I wrote this book, I had gotten a lot better about it. But
mhm,
and I'm still much better than I used to be. But I
sure,
definitely, um, it's been a great season in a lot of ways. But just financial stuff has been really hard because we're building this cabin, and so that I
mhm,
think that's part of like a lot of my frustrations with having so many creative projects that don't really like quote unquote succeed according to the world's thing. Usually I'm like,
right,
it's okay, everybody's like, but lately I'm like, I do so much work that doesn't get paid for,
right,
but
right,
so then
right.
yeah, so that's what kind of what I need to apply it to, like just still being like, it's still necessary, still beautiful. Like I need to not put a monetary thing on it or make it have to make money. But yeah, I guess, yeah, usually I don't really even think about it that much because I usually don't have a lot of so much hard stuff. But because my husband's working on this cabin, I'm the only one working right now. So I think
Mm.
I just have more angst because it's like it just feels
Sure.
like
It's
a
like
lot of work.
anxiety and it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
No, I'm right there with you. It's like I have been in the place where I'm like, do I continue this podcast? Is this even worth my time? It's
Mm,
like, but then like one person will come to me and be like, Jeremy, I love what you shared the other day. And I'm like, okay, okay, God. It's like, I get it. It's like, because honestly, if one person's day gets better because of something I said on the podcast and the time well spent, then and sometimes honestly it's my
mhm,
day that gets
mhm.
better because I talk about it,
Yeah,
just to myself and a camera, right? But
yeah.
and then the fact that I got to meet you and read this, I never would have even realized I probably have some more opportunity to apply to myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I always think back when I have those thoughts, like I mean, I've had especially with my music, I've had a lot of people tell me stories, and my book on singleness too. That one, I will have people just say this helped me so much. But I did have, like, my last album had a song called "I Trust You with My Story" on it, and I lived with this family who I loved so much, and their sister-in-law died of cancer, and she was, I mean, they were like best friends with her,
Oh,
and it was during COVID. It was just horrible. And my friend told me that they sat next to each other in cars and listened to that song, and that Rebecca, who died, just said she was just crying, and she said, "I need to trust God with the story of my husband and kids once I'm
mm,
gone," you know? And that's
yeah.
that's the kind of thing where you're like, there's no like the money doesn't matter, you know? Like
Yeah, yeah,
why
that's
would it
so
matter? I mean,
awesome.
like, why would it matter? When you hear that, it's like there's no monetary thing that can be put on that. I
Right.
lost money in that album, and I hear that story and I'm like, I don't care. Like,
Yeah,
you know.
I'd do it again.
Yes, I would do it
that's
again.
that's that
Absolutely.
do it again fuel.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love for you to share, please, anywhere anyone can find you. Just plug yourself, let
Yeah.
them know where to find you, and of course, all the links are going to be down in the description of the show notes and the YouTube video here. But please, just talk about yourself.
If you're really interested in the mindset stuff, that's prodigalmind.org is that completely focuses on that. And my blog's on there. I haven't been writing it as much, but you can read. There's like quite a few poems and essays, and that I think are pretty good. You might like them. And then there's also the quiz is on prodigalmind.org. And then katehurley.com is kind of everything else. It's like my music and my music lessons. I have a sponsorship program for low income kids, which is really so wonderful. Not all my students are like that, but there's a handful of them. And I'm also a life coach. What else is on there? Well, and you can find my music on Spotify, and on there's some videos on YouTube, especially my last album was a live album, so there's a lot of videos of the live album, which is really fun. So yes, I would love people to hear more of that. I don't care if I get
Yeah.
paid or not, just go listen to
That's awesome. I
it.
love that your goal is to uplift and just be the encouraging friend that we need to other people too. Do you do like speaking and retreats, things like that?
Yes, I
Okay.
have in the past. I haven't been doing that as much lately,
Oh,
but I used to speak all the time actually. Well, I was a
okay.
touring musician for 14 years, and I often would speak and
Right.
teach, especially at YWAM bases. I taught a lot of YWAM bases.
Okay.
So I actually miss all that. I would love to do it again. I've just been very domesticated for a few years just
Sure.
because of the whole
Different season. Yeah,
situation
of
with the
life.
cabin. But soon, once the cabin's built and my husband's working again, I will have a lot more freedom to do things like that again. I miss
Nice.
traveling. I mean, I used to travel so much, and now I have barely traveled. But I love. Yes, I've done retreats on creativity. I've done Prodigal Mind retreats, and I love doing that kind of thing. And soon I will have this beautiful cabin that maybe I can have retreats at my cabin. Like that would be a
Oh,
blast.
that would be
But
awesome.
yeah, we'll see. Because I do love doing that. I love doing women's weekends, and yes, it's something I am passionate about. I just have to get back on that track again once things have settled down a little bit with the cabin being built. But
Totally. Well, I again want to just say thank you so much for being on the podcast today, and yeah, I feel like this is very encouraging, and please go check everything out. Like I said, all the links are going to be down below here. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.